What happens when long-kept secrets threaten to dismantle a family's fragility? On an ordinary night, Julio, a concerned father, decides it's time to confront his daughter Clara about a disagreement he had over dinner. By taking her to his room, he believes he can resolve the situation privately, but instead, what follows is an avalanche of emotions that will redefine what everyone believed they knew about themselves and the bonds that bind them. The house was silent, but the atmosphere was tense. Julio and Clara sat up on the bed, and the charged atmosphere felt heavier by the second. Clara, a teenager full of dreams and insecurities, looked at her father with a mixture of curiosity and fear. She didn't know what to expect from that conversation, but she felt it was important. Julius, in turn, struggled with his own fears. He had always wanted to be a present and understanding father, but the distance that had been established between them in recent months left him distressed. He remembered how Clara used to share everything with him, and this connection seemed to have been lost in the midst of arguments and disagreements. Meanwhile, Marta, Clara's mother, was in the living room, feeling a wave of worry. Clara's cries began to echo through the hallway, cutting through the silence of the night. Marta, unable to ignore her daughter's pain, decided she couldn't wait any longer. With her heart racing, she got up and walked to the room without knocking on the door. Upon entering, she was faced with a scene she had never imagined. Tears ran down Clara's face while Julio looked at her helplessly. What was a conversation about minor disagreements turned into a moment of revelation that would unearth secrets buried years ago, revealing wounds that everyone in the family was trying to hide. The family dynamic, which had once seemed stable, was now about to crumble. What was once a normal home became an emotional battleground where everyone wrestled with their own truths. Marta felt her heart tighten when she realized that what was at stake was much more than a simple disagreement between father and daughter. The secret that had long hung over the family was finally about to be exposed, and the consequences could be devastating. Clara, hearing her mother's crying, realized that that night would not only be about her, but about everyone. She remembered her hopes and dreams, how she always wanted to be an example of courage and honesty. However, pain and fear paralyzed her. The need to be heard and understood drove her, but the revelation of what was about to happen left her in a state of shock. Would it be possible for your entire life to change in a single moment? The tension in the air was palpable, and the interactions that unfolded in that room would become a milestone in the lives of each of them. Julius, Martha, and Claire were about to discover that behind appearances, each carried their own internal battles. As secrets were revealed, the search for understanding and forgiveness would become the real challenge. What seemed to be just a simple conversation would turn into a path of self-discovery and acceptance, where each one would need to confront not only others, but also themselves. Julio sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze fixed on Clara, who now had her hands covered by her face, trying to hold back her tears. He felt a mixture of helplessness and despair. It was hard to believe that the relationship they had built over the years could be threatened by such a simple misunderstanding. What had happened to the connection they once shared? He wanted to know, but at the same time, he feared that the answer would hurt him even more. "Clara," he began, his voice trembling, "I just want to understand what's going on. You've been walking away from me, and I don't know why." Clara raised her head slowly, her eyes red and bright. "I can't talk about it, Dad," she replied, her voice low and hesitant. "I feel like you don't understand me anymore." At that moment, Julio realized that the situation was more complex than he had imagined. It wasn't just a silly fight over the dinner table. Clara was struggling with something he couldn't see. He wanted to be the father who protected her, but he felt he was failing. The idea that his daughter was suffering and he couldn't do anything about it tormented him. Meanwhile, Marta was standing in the doorway, listening to the conversation. Her heart tightened as the words unfolded. She knew there was something more behind Clara's anguish. In the last few months, she had noticed changes in her daughter, the way she isolated herself, the lack of enthusiasm in the little things. Marta had always been the family's mediator, but now she felt that her presence could further complicate the situation. The anger and sadness that were rising between father and daughter was palpable, and she wondered if she should step in or let them work it out on their own. "Clara, please," Julio insisted with a plea in his eyes. "I want to help. Tell me what's hurting you." The young woman took a deep breath, fighting the emotions that overwhelmed her. "It's just that I feel like you don't trust me," she vented. "You always expect me to be perfect, but I'm just a girl trying to figure out who I am. Sometimes I feel like you don't see me." These words cut Julio like a knife. He had always wanted Clara to succeed, but now he realized that her pressure, even if well-intentioned, could have turned against him. The idea that his daughter felt trapped under his expectations made him question his own actions. He remembered times when he had told Clara about his ambitions, not realizing that he was putting an unnecessary weight on her shoulders. "I never wanted you to feel this way," he said, his voice breaking. "I just want the best for you. Sometimes I don't know how to be a better father." Marta decided it was time to join the conversation. She approached, sitting next to Julio on the bed. "Clara, your father loves you more than anything," she said softly. "But he's also human, and that means he makes mistakes. We're all learning together." Clara looked at her mother, and something in her expression seemed to soften the tension a little. I don't know if I can handle it on my own," she confessed. "I feel like I'm losing you and I don't know how to get back." Julius felt a wave of pain when he heard this. He didn't want his daughter to feel like she was alone. "You're not alone, Clara," he said, putting his hand on her shoulder. "We are here. Let's get through this together." At that moment, Clara felt a spark of hope. It was a small step, but it was still something. She looked at her father and saw the sincerity in his eyes. "But what about the secrets?" she asked, her voice trembling. "There are things you haven't told me yet. What else is hidden?" The question hung in the air, and all three felt the weight of the words. Julio and Marta exchanged a complicit look, both aware that it was time to confront the ghosts of the past. The idea of exposing secrets that had been buried for so long was daunting, but Clara deserved to know the truth. "Clara," Julio began, his voice firmer now, but still charged with emotion, "there are things that we keep because we believe it was to protect you. But you are right. What matters most is the truth. And if that means we have to face some hard truths, then we're going to do it together." Marta held Clara's hand, feeling the tension between them. "Whatever you discover, know that we will be here for you. And that will never change." Clara took a deep breath, feeling that the road ahead would be difficult, but perhaps it would also be liberating. She realized that her parents' love was strong enough to withstand the storms that were to come. The fear of the unknown was still there, but the hope of a new beginning was also beginning to sprout. The conversation that had started as a disagreement could turn into a new chapter, where honesty and vulnerability would become the foundations for a deeper relationship. As the words unraveled, and the secrets began to emerge, each of them was about to experience a transformation. Julius, Martha, and Claire were preparing for a path of self-discovery and reconciliation, a path that, while fraught with uncertainty, offered the promise of a more authentic and united future. The tension in the room was palpable. Julio, Clara, and Marta were on the verge of a new phase, but the weight of the past still oppressed them. Clara felt a whirlwind of emotions inside her, and the words that were about to be spoken could change everything. She looked at her father, noticing the concern on his face. He seemed so vulnerable, so human. This new realization left her confused. How could a father who had always been strong and secure feel so lost? "So what are these secrets?" Clara asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Why did you feel you needed to protect me from this?" Julius hesitated, his heart beating fast. He knew this was a turning point, but what about him? How to explain the complexities of his choices, his fears, and the mistakes that accompanied him over the years? He looked at Marta, seeking support, but she also seemed worried. The division between them became more complicated by the moment. Marta took a deep breath and decided she needed to talk. "Clara, some things that happened in the past are linked to our lives and our decisions. Sometimes we think we can avoid someone's pain, but that only creates more distance." Her voice trembled, but her words were firm. "There were times when we had to make difficult choices, and some of them weren't the best. We want you to know that it's always been for love." Clara shook her head, confused. "But I want to know. What happened? What did you hide from me?" His frustration was evident, and tears began to slide down his face again. The feeling of betrayal consumed her. How could they have kept such important secrets? Julio felt his stomach turn. He knew he couldn't dodge it. "When you were younger, we went through financial difficulties. I was so focused on getting a better job, on giving us a better life, that I ended up moving away from you and your mother. I didn't want you to see how much we were fighting," he confessed, his voice breaking. "I didn't want you to feel the pressure. But at the same time, it ended up making you feel isolated." Clara absorbed every word. The revelation hit her hard, and what had previously been just a sense of abandonment now made sense. "But that doesn't justify leaving me aside, Dad. I just wish you were there." "I didn't need material things, I needed you," she replied, her anger now mixed with sadness. Julio felt small. He realized that his quest for success and stability had become a burden on his daughter. "I didn't know how to balance all of that. I just wanted to do what was right, but I ended up getting lost," he said, his voice shaking. Marta looked at Julio, realizing that the conversation was leading them to a critical point. "We all make mistakes, and that doesn't mean we don't love each other. Clara, you need to understand that life is full of difficult choices and we don't have all the answers. But the pain you feel now is a part of the process. We need to face this together," she said, trying to unite the family at a time of vulnerability. Clara looked at her mother, feeling a little more secure, but still full of doubts. "What if I can't forgive them? What if it changes the way I see you?" Uncertainty consumed her, and the idea of losing the image she had of her parents frightened her. "That might take time," Marta replied, empathy in her tone. "But know that love is strong enough to overcome even the greatest disappointments. You don't need to have all the answers right now. The important thing is that we are here, willing to talk and work on it together." But even with the words of comfort, insecurity still hung in the air. Julio wondered if he could really be the father that Clara needed. He felt like a failure, struggling with his own expectations of success and the pressure he had placed on himself. The idea that he might have lost connection with his daughter led him to a dark place where his choices tormented him. Meanwhile, Clara reflected on her role in the family. Was she an ungrateful daughter for not having realized the difficulties that her parents faced? The pressure she felt to be perfect, to live up to Julio's expectations, only increased her anxiety. And at the same time, the pain of feeling invisible in the midst of it all made her question her own identity. Family dynamics were changing, and while there was a desire for reconciliation, the ghosts of the past did not dissipate easily. Clara began to realize that in order to get back on her feet, she would need to confront her own insecurities and fears. The journey to self-improvement was just beginning, and she would have to fight her own shadows. Julio, in turn, began to understand that success should not only be measured by external achievements, but also by the quality of his relationships. He needed to learn to be more present, to listen, and to support Clara in her search for who she really was, even if it meant giving up some of her own ambitions. The conversation dragged on, and the three of them were aware that although the road ahead was full of obstacles, they had a chance to rebuild themselves as a family. The secrets were being exposed, but now, with the sincerity and vulnerability, there was a glimmer of hope. It was a new opportunity to rediscover each other, facing together the challenges that life imposed on them, learning to love each other in a deeper and more honest way. The silence in the room became heavier and heavier after Julio's revelations. Clara felt her heart racing, and a mixture of anger, pain, and confusion invaded her. What had once been a desire to understand had turned into a whirlwind of contradictory feelings. She looked at her father, whose eyes were teary, and felt a pang of compassion, but at the same time, the hurt prevented her from approaching him. "Did you really think you were doing the best for me by walking away?" Clara asked, her voice fluttering. It was a mixture of inquiry and accusation. "Didn't you realize that by hiding reality from me, you ended up making me feel more alone than ever?" Julio felt the weight of his daughter's words like a punch in the stomach. He had always believed that he was protecting Clara, but now the truth presented itself before him, clear and relentless. "Clara, I didn't know what to do," he muttered, guilt spreading across his chest. "I wanted you to have a happy, worry-free childhood, but it seems that by trying to do that, I ended up pushing you further away." Marta, observing the interaction between father and daughter, felt a wave of sadness. She knew that Julius's intention was good, but the execution had been disastrous. "Clara, your father learned the hard way that love is not measured only by material goods or comfort. Sometimes the best intentions can lead down dark paths," she said, her voice soft and encouraging. Clara took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "So what do I do with it now? How can I trust you again?" The desperation in her question made her feel vulnerable, as if she were stripping off her emotional armor. "I don't have an easy answer to that," Julius replied, his voice breaking. "But I'm here. I want to correct my mistakes. I want you to know that I'm willing to fight for our relationship, even if it takes time." At that moment, Clara realized that her father was willing to open up, to recognize his flaws. The idea that he was fighting his own demons began to resonate within her. "What if I can't forgive them? What if I never get to see you guys the same way?" Insecurity showed in his words, and a lump formed in his throat. Julio felt paralyzed. He had never considered the possibility that Clara would not be able to forgive him. The idea that the relationship he valued so much could be irreparably damaged terrified him. "I understand that you are hurt. I just ask that you give me a chance," he begged, sincerity in his gaze. The tension in the room seemed palpable. Clara felt the need to step back, to put some distance between herself and the pain that surrounded her. But at the same time, there was a part of her that wanted to believe that change was possible. I need time, she finally said, tears streaming down her face. I just don't know how to deal with it. Marta, realizing the fragility of the moment, decided to intervene. Clara, the fact that you are willing to talk is already a big step. Recovery takes time, and there is no right or wrong path. The important thing is that we are here, willing to face this together, she emphasized, trying to bring a sense of unity to that chaotic situation. Clara looked at her mother, feeling a little hope in those words. At the same time, she felt burdened by the responsibility to forgive. She knew it wouldn't be easy and that the scars left by the past wouldn't fade quickly. However, the idea that her parents were willing to fight for her began to warm her heart. The conversation continued, and while there were moments of awkward silence, there was also a new energy in the room. Clara began to realize that, in the midst of the pain, there was the possibility of reconstruction. She didn't need to have all the answers at that moment. What mattered was his family's willingness to face challenges together. Meanwhile, Julio reflected on his own journey. Clara realized that although she was facing a path full of uncertainties, there was a new possibility of love and understanding. The desire to rebuild the relationship with her parents began to emerge, and she knew that even though the road was long, she was willing to take the first step. At that time, the room was not just a physical space, it was a symbol of a new beginning. Clara, Julio, and Martha were ready to face their fears, their pains, and their uncertainties. He had lost his way in search of success and stability, but now he understood that true success lay in connecting with his daughter, in being a present and loving father. He committed to change, to be more open, and to listen to Clara, even when it meant facing his own insecurities. The tension that once dominated the environment began to dissipate, giving way to a space of vulnerability and hope. Together they began to walk a new path where honesty and vulnerability would become the foundations of their relationship. And while the tears were still flowing, there was a glimmer of hope that through the pain they could find new meaning to family love. The silence that followed the tense conversation between Clara and her parents was almost deafening. As Clara tried to organize her thoughts, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. How could she trust her father again, who had turned away from her under the justification of protecting her? The questions piled up, and the insecurity grew like a shadow, threatening to consume the small light of hope that had begun to shine within her. Clara stood up, needing some breathing space. She walked to the window and looked out, watching the leaves of the trees dancing in the wind. Nature, with its simple and constant beauty, seemed to be in a state of peace that escapes him. Why is it so difficult? Why does love have to be so complicated? She thought, frustration growing by the moment. Marta, realizing her daughter's internal struggle, decided to intervene. Clara, you don't need to have all the answers right now. What has happened between you is painful, but it is also an opportunity for growth. His father regrets it and is willing to change. This is not something that happens every day. The hope in her mother's voice was an invitation, but Clara didn't know if she could accept it. I know, Mom, Clara replied without turning around. But how can I trust someone who has hidden the truth from me? How can I look at it and not remember what made me feel? The weight of pain and betrayal prevented her from moving forward. Meanwhile, Julius sat at the table, feeling small and powerless. He never imagined that trying to protect his daughter would push her further away. He remembered happy times they shared, laughter and jokes, and the idea that all of this could be tainted by his wrong choice made him feel like a complete stranger. "I only wanted the best for you, Clara," she thought, her mind filled with regret. He knew he had to work hard to regain his daughter's trust, but doubt consumed him. What if he couldn't? That night, Clara lay down in her bed, but sleep did not come. Julio's words echoed in his mind. "I want to correct my mistakes, but how could such a deep wound be corrected?" She found herself thinking about the conversations she had with her friends about her parents, always standing up for them, always trying to explain the flaws she perceived. Now, however, the defense became increasingly difficult. At school, her friend Anna realized that something was wrong. "Clara, you're not well. What happened?" she asked, worried. Clara hesitated but decided to open up. "My father told me things I never knew. He walked away from my life thinking he was protecting me, but he only left me more alone." Anna listened intently, her expression changing as Clara shared her emotions. "It's complicated, I know, but perhaps he did so because he himself was lost. People make mistakes and life is full of new beginnings," Anna said, trying to offer comfort. The conversation with Anna made Clara reflect. She realized that everyone, in some way, faced their own challenges and failures. The idea that Julio could have lost himself in his own insecurities began to make sense. From that moment on, empathy began to sprout in his heart, even if slowly. In the days that followed, Clara continued to meet her feelings. In a moment of introspection, he decided to write a letter to Julio. "I'm hurt, and I don't know how to deal with it. The truth is that I want to understand. I want you and I to be able to find a way together, but I need time. I hope you understand." Delivering the letter was an act of courage. Clara hesitated before entering Julio's office, but she did, feeling her heart race. He was reviewing some documents when she walked in. He looked at Clara and saw the fragility in her eyes. "Hi, Clara," he said, trying to hide his anxiety. "I wrote this for you," she said, extending the letter. He picked her up and immediately felt the weight of the words she had chosen. "Thank you, daughter. I'll read it carefully," he replied. His heart tightened. From that day on, Julio began to make more effort to connect with Clara. He respected his space, but he was also present. At a dinner party, he decided to share stories from his own childhood, times when he felt lost or unsafe. "I don't want you to go through what I went through," he said, trying to show that he was willing to open up. And, little by little, Clara began to see a change. Julio's vulnerability began to create a bridge between them. Although there was still a long journey ahead, she began to feel that love could be rebuilt, that the scars could heal over time. Marta, observing the dynamic between father and daughter, felt relieved. She knew that communication was the key and that the honesty that finally emerged could be the first step to healing. "We are in this together, Clara. Let's face all of this as a family," she said, always encouraging. And so as Clara dealt with her pain and insecurities, she also began to realize that the journey to forgiveness wasn't just about forgetting, but about understanding. Love, even when wounded, had the capacity to renew itself. And with that, new bonds were being formed, small connections that could lead to a brighter future, where the mistakes of the past would be learnings and not just scars. The morning light poured in through Clara's bedroom window, illuminating the shadows that still hovered in her heart. After the letter was delivered, something inside her began to change. As she got ready for school, she reflected on how life had become an emotional roller coaster. Clara looked at her reflection in the mirror, and for the first time in weeks, she saw a spark of determination in her eyes. At school, when she met Anna, Clara felt that their friendship had strengthened. Anna always knew how to bring out the best in Clara, and that day the conversation flowed naturally. "You look different, Clara. What happened?" asked Anna with an encouraging smile. "I wrote a letter to my father. I'm trying to understand what happened between us," Clara replied, her words coming out with more confidence than she expected. Anna watched her carefully, and Clara continued, "You know, I realized that I can't go on living with anger alone. I need to find a path to healing." Anna nodded, admiring her friend's courage. "This is really amazing. Sometimes letting others into our hearts is the first step to overcoming," Anna said, recalling how, in difficult times, their friendship had been an anchor. The conversation turned into a reflection on the challenges that each one faced. Clara shared how difficult it was to trust Julio again, but also acknowledged that he was struggling to reconnect. "If I don't try, I'll never know if we can rebuild our relationship," she said, as Anna encouraged her to explore those emotions. Over the next few days, Clara began to notice a small but significant growth within her. Every time she met Julio, she forced herself to talk, to share something about her day. She talked about school, her hobbies, and even her frustrations. His vulnerability, as he opened up about his own insecurities, made her feel like they weren't that far apart. One night, while they were having dinner together, Clara decided to take a little more risk. "Dad, do you remember that time we went to the park and you taught me how to ride a bike?" he asked, noting Julio's nostalgic expression. He smiled, remembering the happy moment. "Yes, you were so determined. I'll never forget how you felt when you were able to ride without anyone's help." "I was afraid of falling, but you were there, encouraging me," Clara continued, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm trying to remember that feeling now, the feeling that I can overcome my fears." Julius looked at her, his eyes shining with pride and understanding. "And you go, Clara. We're in this together." These small dialogues began to create a new space between father and daughter. Clara realized that healing would not come overnight, but every conversation, every laugh shared, was a step in the right direction. The empathy she began to feel for Julio turned into an understanding that he was also human, with flaws and regrets, just like her. Marta, always attentive, noticed the change in the relationship between Clara and Julio. In a one-on-one conversation, she said, "Clara, I'm so proud of you. You are showing incredible strength. Remember that trust is a process. Don't rush." Clara nodded, absorbing her mother's words. "I know, Mum. I'm learning to be more patient with myself and my dad. It's strange, but I'm starting to understand that we can grow from our mistakes." Marta smiled, hugging Clara, feeling that the connection between the two became even stronger. Life at school continued, but Clara felt lighter. With Anna's support, she allowed herself to explore new activities, such as a drama club, where she could express her emotions creatively. Rehearsals became an outlet, allowing her to connect with others, creating unexpected bonds. Friendship with new classmates helped her see the world in a different way with more colors and possibilities. In one rehearsal, Clara found herself playing a character who faced similar challenges to hers. As she represented pain and overcoming, she felt a surge of emotions that made her reflect on her own journey. The applause at the end of the performance brought a sense of accomplishment that she had never experienced before. That's true success, he thought. It's not just about achieving something, it's about connecting with others and with ourselves. As the weeks passed, Clara began to apply the lessons she had learned. She allowed herself to feel anger, sadness, but also joy and hope. Every emotion was part of the process. When she felt insecure, she remembered the words of Anna and her mother. "I'm growing. I'm learning to trust myself," she said to herself like a mantra. At the end of a month, Clara decided it was time to have a deeper conversation with Julio. One Sunday afternoon, while they were having coffee together, she said, "Dad, I want us to be better for each other. I'm ready to try to rebuild our relationship, but I need you to be willing to do it too." Julio looked at her, and the sincerity in his voice made him feel hopeful. "I'm here, Clara. I want us to be a family, and that means working together. I'll do whatever it takes to win you back, and I hope we can move on." The conversation turned into a moment of clarity and understanding. Both realized that while the road ahead could be challenging, there was love and a willingness to face hardships together. Clara smiled, feeling that she was finally on the right path to overcoming and growing. And with that, life promised new and exciting possibilities. Clara sat at the kitchen table, the aroma of fresh coffee wafting in the air. The afternoon sun illuminated the room, but his mind was shrouded in clouds. It was the day of the great conversation with Julius, and the weight of expectation tightened her chest. She knew that this conversation was not just about her emotions, but the starting point for a new phase in her relationship with her father. However, the fear that everything might fall apart made her hesitate. While Julio prepared for the meeting, Clara relived the difficult moments that the two had faced. The silence that followed seemed heavy, as if they were both waiting for the other to break the barrier. It was Clara who finally spoke. "Dad, I want us to be better for each other." The sincerity in her words made an immediate impact. Julio looked her in the eyes, and Clara saw a mixture of hope and fear reflected in her eyes. "I want that too, Clara, but it's hard for me. I've made mistakes, and I don't know how to fix them," he replied, his voice trembling. Those words hit Clara hard. Every unspoken word, every look of disappointment formed an invisible barrier between them. She felt that despite her efforts, there was still a great distance to be covered. Her heart beat fast as she remembered the promises she had made to herself. To be stronger, braver, more willing to face her fears. When Julio sat down at the table, Clara noticed the anxious expression on his face. He was also nervous. She felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a hint of compassion. She remembered all the times she felt abandoned and disappointed, but also the happy memories they had together. "I also made mistakes, Dad, but I don't want that to separate us. I'm willing to try, but I need you to be with me." The moment of vulnerability was intense. Clara felt the tension in the air, as if time had stopped. Julio's gaze was fixed on her, and she realized that he was struggling with his own insecurities. "What do you need from me?" he asked, his voice soft but full of emotion. Clara took a deep breath. "I need you to listen to me. I don't want you to just try to be a perfect parent. I want you to be honest about how you feel. If you're sad or afraid, tell me. We can face this together." Clara's words echoed in Julio's mind. He knew he had closed himself off many times, avoiding showing his vulnerability. "I don't want to hurt you again," he admitted, the pain visible on his face. "I don't know how to deal with all this. Guilt consumes me." The conversation deepened, and emotions began to boil over. Clara saw tears in her father's eyes and realized that behind his strong facade was a man fighting his own ghosts. "I'm afraid too, Dad. Fear that we can never go back to the way we were," she said, her voice breaking. "But we need to try." Julio leaned forward, sincerity in his gaze. You are the reason why I want to become a better person, Clara. I want to be the father you deserve. The tension in the air began to dissipate, but the intensity of the conversation was still present. Clara realized that the journey of reconnection would not be easy, but there was a new understanding between them. She felt that the vulnerability they were both showing was actually a sign of strength. "Let's start slowly," Clara suggested. "We can have a day of the week just for us. We can do something we both enjoy, like go to the park or cook together." Julio smiled, the first time in a long time that Clara had seen him so light. "I would love that. And I promise I'll strive to be more open with you. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry that weight alone." Clara felt more relieved than ever. The conversation had been difficult, but their honesty had created a safe space for both of them. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but now there was hope. She was no longer alone on this journey, and it strengthened her. As they talked, Clara also reflected on the lessons she had learned over time. Life was not just about achievements or failures, but about the relationships we built. What really mattered were the bonds of love and understanding that could be formed, even after mistakes. With each moment she shared with Julio, it was as if she was rediscovering the essence of what it meant to be a family. The coffee cooled, but the warmth of the words exchanged between father and daughter warmed their hearts. Clara realized that by opening up, she was not only helping Julio, but also herself. The courage she had cultivated had brought her to a new level of understanding where pain and joy could coexist and where hope flourished in the little things. That day, Clara not only faced her fears, but also helped Julio face his. And by allowing themselves to be vulnerable with each other, they began the path of healing with their hearts filled with new possibilities. The journey was just beginning, and Clara felt like she was finally in control of her own story, ready to write a new chapter of love and reconciliation. Clara sat at the kitchen table, watching Julio with a new eye. The weight of the conversation they had just had still hung in the air, but there was a lightness that didn't exist before. She realized that by sharing their vulnerabilities, they had both taken an important step toward reconnection. The coffee was chilling, but the heat of the conversation had created a renewed bond between father and daughter. Julio, still absorbing Clara's words, began to understand that honesty was the way to healing. He had always felt like he had to be the strong one, the provider, but now he saw that his fragility also had a place in their relationship. "Clara," he began in a firmer voice, "you made me realize that I don't have to carry this weight alone. I'm human too, and it's normal to have mixed feelings." Clara smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. "And I want you to know that I'm here for you, Dad. Not only in good times, but also in difficulties." Her words echoed in his mind. They represented a new beginning, a space where both could be authentic. In the days that followed, the transformation in the dynamic between them became evident. Clara and Julio began to spend more time together, enjoying the simple moments. Sunday evenings were filled with board games and laughter, while Saturday mornings were reserved for walks in the park. This time together brought unexpected joy, and Clara felt that the connection was slowly being restored. She began to reflect on her own journey. From the moment she decided to face her fears and open up to her father, she realized that she was actually overcoming her limitations. Before, Clara felt insecure, trapped in an image of a perfect daughter that she could never live up to. Now she understood that vulnerability was part of being human. "I'm learning to be myself without masks," she thought, as she looked out the window on a sunny day. Julio was also changing. He began to open up more about his feelings and insecurities, something he had never done before. She told Clara about the challenges she faced in her childhood and how it shaped her way of acting. "I always thought I needed to be the strong man, but the truth is that I was afraid too," he confessed on one of the walks. "And now I'm learning that it's acceptable to show that." These deep conversations not only strengthened the bond between them, but also allowed Clara to see her father in a new light. The man who once seemed distant and closed now revealed himself as a human being, full of flaws and hopes. "We're all on a learning path," Clara reflected, feeling closer to him with each passing day. The transformation in their relationship also began to impact other aspects of Clara's life. She felt more confident in her relationships with friends and colleagues. The courage she had cultivated in facing her father led her to be more authentic in all aspects of her life. "If I can be true to my father, I can be true to everyone," she thought, realizing that it strengthened her. In addition, Julio, by opening up to Clara, allowed himself to be more vulnerable in his professional life. He began to share his ideas and concerns with co-workers, something he had never done before. "I can't be an effective leader if I'm not honest," he mused in a meeting, realizing that authenticity could inspire confidence in his team. This change has not only improved their self-esteem, but also created a more collaborative work environment. As Clara and Julio continued to strengthen their relationship, they also realized that love was not just about happy times, but about facing difficulties together. They learned to deal with conflicts more constructively, using open communication as a tool to resolve disagreements. Conflict doesn't mean that we're far apart, but that we have the opportunity to understand each other better, Clara said in a conversation, and Julio agreed, knowing that this was the key to their evolution. Finally, Clara began to understand that true success was not only in material achievements, but in the relationships she cultivated. "What really matters is the love and connection we have with each other," she thought, as she watched her father smile during a family dinner. The laughter and happiness that filled that space were the true wealth she sought. Clara and Julio's journey was just beginning, but they had already taken significant steps toward healing and reconnection. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment together brought them closer. Clara felt she was finally in control of her own story, not just as a daughter, but as a woman who had the strength to face her fears and build meaningful relationships. And so, Clara and Julio moved forward, more united than ever, prepared to face the challenges that life presented to them. Their story was not just about overcoming, but about the beauty of a new beginning, where love and understanding became the foundations of a new relationship. Clara observed life around her with a new understanding. Time had passed since those transformative conversations with Julio, but the lessons they learned together still reverberated in their lives. The relationship between father and daughter was no longer the same. There was a depth that had previously seemed unreachable. They had built a bridge of understanding where before there was only an abyss of silence. Clara often reflected on her journey. The insecurities that had accompanied her during adolescence were dissipating. By opening up to Julius, she not only drew closer to him, but also found the courage to show herself and others. The masks he wore to protect himself were gradually set aside. Now she felt stronger, and that strength inspired her to be honest in all her relationships. His friends noticed the change. Clara was more present, more authentic, and this attracted people to her. The friendship he cultivated with others blossomed into an environment of trust and mutual support. Julio, in turn, began to see his own limits in a way he had never done before. He allowed himself to be vulnerable, not only with Clara, but also in his work. By sharing his concerns with colleagues, he created a safe space where others felt comfortable expressing their own struggles. This new opening not only improved the mood of the team, but also made Julio feel more fulfilled professionally. He realized that by showing his vulnerability, he was becoming a more effective and respected leader. Years passed, and Clara graduated from college. The challenge of being a young adult brought new uncertainties, but she was better equipped to face them. She understood that true success wasn't just about high grades or a high-paying job, but about the connection she cultivated. The love and understanding she had for Julio motivated her to create healthy relationships in her personal and professional life. Clara found a job that allowed her to help other people, something she always aspired to do. She felt fulfilled when she saw the positive impact she could have on the lives of others, something that directly reflected what she learned from Julio. Julio, on the other hand, became a mentor for young people in his area of expertise. He believed that honesty and vulnerability were essential for personal and professional growth. By sharing his experiences and teaching the importance of being authentic, he inspired others to open up, creating a support network that spread beyond his team. Over time, Julio saw that true wealth was not in material achievements, but in the ability to touch the lives of the people around him. He felt at peace knowing that his flaws didn't define him, but rather helped him become the man he was. As she reflected on her own journey, Clara understood that the transformation she experienced was not just about her and Julius, but about everyone who crossed her path. The unexpected friendship she developed with peers and even some people who initially didn't fit into her life helped her see the world from a new perspective. She learned to value diversity in people's experiences and emotions, which made her grow immensely. One day, while walking in the park with Julio, Clara realized how life had changed. "You know, Dad," she began, "sometimes I look back and I can't believe how much we've both evolved. Vulnerability that once felt like a burden has become our greatest strength." Julio smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. They were in a place of harmony, not only with each other, but with themselves. Clara and Julio's journey had no definite end. It was a continuous learning and growth. They discovered that life was made up of ups and downs, but that facing each challenge together made everything lighter. The wisdom gained over the years did not make them immune to suffering, but it taught them how to deal with it in a healthier way. They were at peace with themselves and with others, living according to the lessons they learned. And so Clara and Julio moved on, not only as father and daughter, but as partners in life, ready to face whatever came their way. They learned that the true beauty of life was in the connections they created, the vulnerability they shared, and the love they cultivated. This was the wealth that could never be measured, but that would always be present in their hearts. Clara and Julio, now, with the life experiences that shaped their personalities and strengthened the bond between father and daughter, walked together through the park, observing the world around them. The leaves of the trees danced softly in the wind, and the sun filtered through the branches, illuminating their faces. It was an ordinary day, but full of meaning. "Have you ever stopped to think about how everything has changed?" asked Clara, breaking the silence that enveloped the two. Julius, with a thoughtful look, nodded. "Actually, yes, we face so much together, Clara. Each challenge was an opportunity for growth." Clara smiled, remembering difficult moments, but also the achievements that followed. "I used to think that success was just about having a good job or being recognized. But now I realize that true success is being able to touch people's lives, as you did with your colleagues and mentors." Julio smiled, proud of his daughter. He had learned through his own experiences that true wealth was not in material goods, but in the relationships we build and the impacts we cause. Life is an ongoing journey, and each of us has the power to make a difference, even if it's small. As they talked, a gentle breeze brought a sense of peace. Clara felt a lightness in her heart, as if all her worries were dissipating. She had finally freed herself from the bonds that bound her to the past. You know, Dad, everything we've been through has taught me that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. Julio nodded, understanding his daughter's words. It's true. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create spaces for empathy and understanding. It transforms not only our lives, but also the lives of others. In this moment of shared reflection, something special happened. As they watched a group of children playing, Clara spotted a small girl who looked sad, sitting alone in a corner. Without thinking twice, she approached the little girl and started talking to her. Julio watched her with a smile on his face, realizing that Clara was applying everything she had learned. The impact that Clara had on the girl was instantaneous. In a few minutes, the sadness dissipated, and the little girl began to smile. Clara returned to where Julio was with a warm heart. "That's what I want to do," she said, her eyes shining. "I want to help people feel seen and heard." Julius looked at Clara with deep admiration. "You already do that, Clara. And the best part is that you're just getting started. Life is a cycle of learning and teaching, and you are contributing to making this cycle even richer." And so as they walked back home, a sense of gratitude permeated the air. They not only reflected on the changes that had occurred in their lives, but also on what was yet to come. Clara and Julio were ready to face new challenges, armed with the wisdom acquired over the years. Their journey was not just about self-improvement, it was a story of love, friendship, and transformation. Both understood that life could be unpredictable, but that every experience, every failure, and every new beginning shaped who they were. The real beauty was in how they faced these challenges together, always ready to support and inspire each other. Then at the height of this reflection, Clara had a vision that surprised her. She remembered a story she had heard about a supernatural intervention, something that had changed someone's life in unexpected ways. "What if somehow all our experiences prepared us for something bigger?" she asked, with a spark of hope in her eyes. "What if life really did have a divine purpose, and we were just beginning to understand it?" Julio smiled, realizing that his daughter was touching a deep point. "Maybe that's what life is all about, Clara. A host of opportunities to learn, grow, and help each other. And who knows, in the end, it all connects in a way that we can't even see now." The day ended, and as they walked home, Clara and Julio felt grateful for all the lessons they had learned and for the people who crossed their paths. Their journey was a tapestry of experiences that together told a story of love and transformation. And so the story of Clara and Julio ends, but the invitation to reflection remains. Each of us has the ability to transform our lives and the lives of others. As we look inward and face our vulnerabilities, we can discover an unwavering strength. And who knows, as we do so, we will also find the divine intervention that many believe is always present, guiding us toward a greater purpose. Therefore, at the end of this journey, Clara and Julio invite everyone to reflect on their own experiences. What lessons have you learned along the way? How have your vulnerabilities shaped who you are today? Share your reflections in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can continue this conversation and help each other grow and evolve, always in search of greater meaning in our lives.